Still Wakes the Deep, Jusant, and Courtisans. This is Staying In. Kris,
Sam.
what happens when a doctor gets wedded? Is there a, from master to mister,
Yeah.
is there a doctor to disaster?
I presume what happens to me now is what happens to famous people or people of renown who get invited to a university graduation ceremony to get an honorary doctorate.
Oh.
I presume now I'm going to get an honorary doctorate for the county that I live in, maybe. Maybe that's that, I think.
Obviously, when this is released, but not now, in a fantastic Christopher Nolan-esque piece of creative works, you will be married, but you are not married now.
No.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me be the first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How do you feel about being best man for the 8th time in your life?
Not the 8th time, only the 2nd.
Oh, it's only the 2nd. I swear you've been best man many times before. So we've been best men to each other.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been best man to my brother, and you were Dan's best man.
I was Dan's best man.
Wow.
And obviously if Pete gets married, it's just an all-out brawl. Who's going to get that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Pete's just going to snap a snooker cue in half and just throw it into the middle on the floor and between the three of us.
You decide. Looking at every other wedding you've been to, what was the thing that you thought, oh, that must have been really difficult, but actually turned out to be really easy? And what's the thing that you thought, oh, that must be really easy, but actually turned out to be really difficult?
Okay, so the thing I thought that would be really difficult that turned out to be easy was the seating plans.
All right, yeah.
Because when I told people I was getting married, everyone was kind of bringing out anecdotes of how long it took them to kind of get the seating plan right and who was sitting next to who and what tables people were on and all of this. And actually, that was one of the easiest things, to be honest. It was dead easy, dead simple. And I think playing games like Taverns of Tearful, those kinds of spatial puzzles. Oh, this was just great. I think somebody there is a board game out there where it's trying to get everyone in a photograph, isn't it? A group photo. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, a wedding seating plan is kind of ripe for a kind of a game, I think. In terms of something that we thought would be easy that ended up being quite difficult. Do you know, one thing that really has, been quite difficult for me is because I've never ever thought about getting married before, and I could visualize myself in a suit and my colors. I found it extremely difficult to think about suits for you, Dan and Pete.
Oh, tell me about it.
And as literally the reason why Peter's not here right now, our erstwhile friend, is because he's currently getting fitted into his suit.
It takes him that long.
It is like a wetsuit, Pete. It's neoprene. Pete requested neoprene for his suit, and we acquiesced.
The goose fat supplied.
Yeah, that's it.
He has to spend 24 hours in it first,
yeah,
and then it gets removed. And
actually, that is the most difficult thing. It's been the bloody suits, because I rang up a company. They're a suit hire company. I rang them up and I said, "Look,
we won't say the company is, but it rhymes with Boss Moss."
Yeah, incredible. Crack that code, listener. And I went on their website and I wanted to set up, obviously, kind of an order to order some suits in.
Well, yeah, because you've got people around the country. This is what people don't realise. The impact, the love for you isn't just confined to your small area. It spreads across this fair country of ours. It spreads nationwide. So, when... It was the same thing that I did for my suits.
And Dan did the same.
Yeah, picked up something off the shelf or at a big enough chain so people, no matter where they are, would be able to get access to them. Otherwise, it is a quote-unquote right faff. Yes.
And this was a bit of both, strangely, because I went on the website and for me to create an order for the three of you to get your suits, I either needed to know your sizes in advance, or I had to book a fitting for you and know the time in which you wanted your fitting and where you wanted your fitting. I couldn't have an option where I just created the order and then got you to kind of arrange when a time's convenient for you to be fitted and to put your sizes in. So I rang them up and they said, well, look, just put in some random numbers now. And I was like, I don't really want to do that in case there's a cock up and we end up having those as placeholders, lest we forget that time that Pete nearly got for Dan's wedding trousers with a 40-inch waist because he didn't know how to measure his own waist. We assume he measured it with his arms by his side. So I was paranoid about that. So I put in your respective names and email addresses and contact details. And then as you started to go in and kind of meet with them to get fitted, it became patently aware that none of your names or email addresses came across, apart from one. I think at that point all of you had your name actually, I think.
Yeah, I think we're all under my name.
But all of you have got PhDs.
Yeah, we've all ended up with PhDs.
Yeah.
My order is now the same as Dan's order. So whenever I get emails about Dan's order, it comes to me and I have to forward them on to him. And I think that, it's just like a level of anxiety that no one needs before a wedding. It's the fact that like I went to go and pick up my suit at the earliest possible convenience because I was convinced that they'd got my measurements wrong.
Yeah.
Because what happened is that they got my order, and because it wasn't really associated with me in any meaningful way, and then Pete went to go and get his suit fitted, and being the wonderful man that he is, decided that he was going to quote unquote sort it out, lads, and he at that point of organising had assured us that everyone's right sizes had been put in. He'd corrected everyone's email addresses. And he'd corrected everyone's titles. And then once that hit the Boss Moss servers, it suddenly turned us all into doctors. Me and Dan shared a name and an email. So who knows what suits we were picking up at that point, and who knows what Peter's ended up with. Probably just, the right leg is my size, the left leg is Dan's. Yeah,
it's just going to look like a bullfighter.
Yeah. So, I was at a wedding recently where they did get one of the sizes wrong. Not the company that we were using, but the person measuring them got the sizes wrong. And we were just like, you're looking great in your suit. And he went, am I? And he opened up his blazer, and no joke, his suit trousers were up just underneath his pectorals.
Oh my god!
Tied together by a brown belt.
Oh my gosh!
And he was just like, I look like a 1960s gangster.
I mean, his flies were about 1 meter long.
Let's talk about, because obviously you couldn't make your stag, and it was awful. So I was determined that before you got married, that me and you would have a little bit of time, at least together, an evening,
exactly,
to kind of have a little mini stag. I still want to do another thing at another point.
Yes, we will do, definitely. We have to do that.
And I think we'd always planned to do something a little bit smaller and sillier away from the main stag, but anyway, this was nice. But we sat down and we played a few games.
We certainly did.
And we watched Morbius. We won't be talking about Morbius.
No. Because we want Madam Web to compare it to.
Because how can we possibly quantify a film like Morbius until we've seen Madam Web? I mean, words fail me, but that film. But we did play, and we did talk actually in a bit of a pre-pod about some of the stuff that we've been playing recently. It's a meditative journey through a barren and abandoned world that involves climbing and strange mystical beings. And I thought, here we go.
It's me in a nutshell.
That's Kris in a nutshell. It's from Don't Nod, who previously made things like Life is Strange,
Yes,
and Life is Strange 2. But like I was just on the website, and actually, like, their games catalog is a lot more extensive than I ever thought it was. Like, I genuinely thought they'd only ever made Life is Strange, but they've made tons of stuff.
Yeah, and they've got that new game. I think it's Mixtape. Is that the next one?
Lost Records.
Lost Records. Sorry.
Yeah, but there's a game called Banishers, Harmony, Twin Mirror, Vampire, Remember Me. Like, I genuinely thought it was just Life is Strange, but hey ho, here we are. So Jusant is they describe it as a action puzzle climbing game, and how it starts is it says Jusant and explains that Jusant is a French word for receding tide, and how the game begins in the opening cinematic is that you play this character who's got a strange blue creature in their backpack, and they're walking along the desert, and in the desert there's lots of abandoned and rusted boats and ships, and you're heading towards this enormous tower, I wouldn't even describe it as a mountain. Like, geologically, it doesn't feel natural. Like, it is this like complete outlier in this very flat and barren landscape. It is a tower that is straight in front of you, and you approach the tower and you just start climbing it, and there's no real impetus to explain why you're climbing it. There's no real explanation or motivation as to what will happen when you reach the top. In a move that's a bit Journey-esque, you don't know why you're heading towards that bright light in the distance. You just have a feeling that is the way that you need to go. In Jusant, you just climb up. You just keep on going up and up and up and up and up this massive long tower. And you interact with the world by either pressing A or X on the controller to kind of pull yourself up onto ledges, or you use the trigger buttons, which act as your left and right hands, to grab handholds in the rocks. And then you're moving, you're grabbing, you release them to release your hand, and then you move it up to grab another bit. You release them, then you grab, you release them, and you grab, and you release them, and you grab. And slowly but surely, you make your way up this tower. And even though it's tempting to compare it to Journey, I think that the only reason I really use Journey is just to try and describe it a bit better for what it is. I think they are doing two very different things, but approaching them in similar ways in terms of your engagement with the game. And I completed it recently. Only took me about 4 or 5 hours, I think, which is about exactly the right amount of time that I would, have for a game like this. And yeah, I was really blown away by it as a game, and I shouldn't have been as surprised as I was also by the level of the writing. And because as you go and explore this world that has been chiseled and hammered out of this tower, you find lots of little clues and abandoned diaries and dinner orders and any all bits and pieces, and which give you an insight into how this world worked, a bit of an insight into what actually occurred in terms of this some sort of like apocalyptic event. And I think the thing that I really loved is that there are moments in this game where you don't find any bits of paper, or there's no direct written narrative at all, but instead you find these abandoned seashells, and inside the seashells it's captured a soundscape of what happened in certain locations. And you have these wonderful moments where you have been climbing and climbing and climbing for minutes and minutes and minutes. And you'll reach this plateau and you'll kind of look, every single time you kind of look over the edge to see how far you've come. And then you'll find this seashell and you'll hear the sound of like a kettle boiling or wood being sawn or children playing or a transaction being made in a shop. And it will like flit from picture to picture, exploring this plateau or this area. And it was just a real magical like element to this game as a whole. And I could have really just stayed in those soundscapes for a lot longer.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, actually. I know it sounds really silly, but it's got one of the nicest menu sound effects I've ever heard. When you go to the options menu and you're going up and down, it's the sound of someone just pressing into like a real beautiful dusting of sand. It's like ASMR, it really is. And I think that's something that's really, really worth mentioning, because a lot of people, I imagine, in reviews will fixate on its visuals. Which remind me a lot of that game that you bought me for my Switch, Rime.
Yes, yeah.
It feels almost like Rime, but with an increased verticality to it. And the colours really, really pop. But it has that nice mix of the light and the dark as well. You're not just going up this edifice, but you're going into it. In some instances, you can go down it. So it lacks that. It doesn't have that same sense of something that is akin to almost like a pilgrimage, that I am working up to something. That there is that sense of 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of thing. I've only played about 20 minutes of it, and already I'm starting to learn that rhythm that goes with it. And I'm just really quite curious to know, is it the case that you kind of, once you get used to the buttons, that's it, you forget they're there and you're just doing it effortlessly, as we tend to do with most platformers? Or are there those moments where you have to recalibrate and then you feel the weight of, oh my word, I'm really high up right now? Because obviously you have a rope, and at instances you can use pitons to kind of like kind of anchor yourself to the rock face. But I'm quite curious to know, does that, even though it's 4 hours, does that kind of repetitive kind of R2, L2, R2, L2 get in the way of that kind of sense of flow that comes through the visuals and through its sound design?
I think you've encountered pretty much all the mechanics that you're going to encounter. Like there is no great surprises in terms of, you don't suddenly get rocket boots or like another way of climbing or interacting with the walls as the game goes on. They're in you quite early on, you get like a stamina meter as well that you need to like manage, and it's really nice how you manage it, because you click in one of the analog buttons and they like sit back in the rope and sort of hang their arms down by their sides and then sort of pick themselves back up again. The main challenge comes with, in the very early stages, it's very clear where you need to go. It's very clear which direction that you take through the rock, which makes sense because these are the most explored areas of the tower. But as you get higher and higher and higher, there's less evidence around about what is the correct route that you need to take. So I don't know if you've noticed, like in the early 20 minutes or so, that there's certain sections where you need to like wall run.
Yes, I've been doing that. And
you'll notice like on the wall that there's like scratches along the wall where you need to actually wall run from one section of wall to another. However, when you get higher up and higher up the mountain, because these are areas that haven't been explored as much and therefore haven't witnessed the same type of erosion over time as people have travelled the same pathways, it becomes less and less clear which direction you need to take, or even if there is a right direction. And the routes up become a lot more multiple for that reason. So you start to become and use the climbing more as an explorative tool rather than a tool that just gets you from A to B, and you suddenly start using all the suite of everything that you've got to your disposal in order to make your way around rooms, which is really, a fantastic way that the game kind of helps you feel really confident in what you can do, and how this very limited skill set of just grabbing, putting in a piton and doing some swinging can actually really rocket you up and really get you exploring the space with a bit of verticality. And I really loved that, because I think that there is a sense of all the way through this game of not really knowing if I was ever going in the right direction. All I knew was I just had to go up. And then there's that surprise where you reach a plateau or reach a level and you look down, or you can see all the ropes that you've left from point to point and just think, I've made it all the way from there to there. And unlike a very traditional video game where your progress is horizontal, and there's not really that sense of, traversal progression, here it's like it becomes, you're able to really enjoy that level of, making your way through a level, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's really special. And and I think the other thing that really caps it off in terms of an experience for me is the soundtrack is incredible.
Yeah, it does remind me a lot of Rhyme's soundtrack, actually.
The music is by Guillaume Ferran, and you can get it on Spotify. So we'll definitely be adding some of this to the Spotify playlist.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, having only played 20 minutes, this is going to go into that back catalogue of games that I dip into when I want a sustained meditative experience. So obviously a lot of those, that game company games like Journey, but also Flower. Absu, I think, is a really good example of that.
Underrated Absu. Don't think Absu really got the praise it deserved, but that's a great game.
I thought of it like when I was playing it today, Jusant, the moments that remind me of Absu are when you listen to the shell in Jusant, you can choose when you want to end that moment.
Yes.
And that's very much like in Absu when you're just watching the fish and you can just sit and watch them. It's just having this incredible aquarium in your room.
Yeah.
Those kinds of meditative experiences that aren't just a guided meditation app.
No.
Where that kind of flow state where the brain is both aroused and relaxed, you're kind of in that midpoint. Those are the kind of games that I think it joins, I think. Do you want to hear about well, there is a kind of an overlap here. So I want you to imagine we've got Jusant as one circle, and then there's another circle that's going to intersect with it to make a little bit of a Venn diagram. And that's a game that is of a similar length, I'd say 4 to 5 hours. I completed it this week. I played it in about 3 sessions, I would say. It is kind of moving through a kind of a hostile space. It's an unknown or unfamiliar space. There is some kind of jumping and some climbing as part of that. But other than that, there are no similarities whatsoever. I've just completed Still Wakes the Deep.
Okay.
From the Chinese Room.
All right. Okay. So this is your little darling video game company.
I love the Chinese Room very, very much.
And this is their return to horror, isn't it? Right? Because they sort of started out making sort of walking / horror.
Yeah.
Horror games.
That's it. Yeah. So this is part of that kind of rostra of story-led kind of horror narrative games. So yes, there was Dear Esther, which was the game that really kind of kicked off I suppose really the term walking sim, which was kind of used in kind of an insulting manner by some critics, but has now become this slightly polarizing subgenre of gaming where the player walks, and that's really the kind of tool at their own disposal. But Dear Esther, which was about grief. Then you had Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs, which I never played because, to be honest, it looked really creepy, which is kind of more survival horror. Then you've got my favourite game of all time, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which kind of draws from the kind of cozy catastrophe genre of literature from the 60s. And then you get this, which is a first-person horror. So all of these previous ones have been first-person kind of experiences. And obviously that adds a real sense of tension because you can't see what's behind you unless you physically turn your head. And I think it's quite telling that in this game, and I played this on the PlayStation, if you push the R3 button in, you instantaneously turn 180 and snap back. Mm-hmm. And there are times where you'll want to do that. And there'll be times where you will wish that button isn't there because you don't want to know what is behind you.
Wow.
I would probably describe this game as something that is kind of like a beautiful kind of terror. I'm really interested to know what you make of it, Sam. I know you're going to play it at some point.
Yeah.
And it's not because, it's a horror game, this sort of thing. The reason I'm interested in it from your perspective is this is a very, very Scottish game. And I know you spent some time living in Scotland. You actually spent some time on a boat in the North Sea.
I did, yeah.
You have immersed yourself in Scottish culture. And one of the kind of things that the game makers were really passionate about was making that feel very accurate and authentic. So the premise of the game is this. It's December 1975, and you play as Kaz McCleary, who is a person who got into a bit of trouble on the mainland, who has managed to blag a job as an electrician aboard an oil rig in the North Sea. Mm-hmm. And whilst you're on this oil rig, a chaotic event occurs, and you essentially have to fight to survive against an environment that is slowly collapsing around you, but there's something else that is non-natural that has made its way into this oil rig.
Nice.
And that's the kind of premise of the game, really.
So when I first heard about this game, the thing that reminded me most in terms of here is somewhere where you're free to explore, but there is something after you, or there is something else in here with you. So immediately I thought of games like Alien Isolation, and most specifically because it's a bit more of an indie game and therefore a bit more of the vibe of this one, I thought of Soma.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Soma's a great game. Yeah, great example.
Soma, interestingly, is, in terms of horror, is actually the thing chasing me around the environment didn't actually scare me as much as some of the narrative themes that Soma was exploring. So how, without giving too much away and ruining the horrorness of it, and as you know, Kris said the other day, I think both me and you have been on a bit of a horror bender as of late, and I think that, especially in myself, I am just. It's been a very slow transition, but I am more and more embracing horror as a genre in terms of, exploring ideas and themes.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think because I'm getting married soon and I'm a little bit anxious about it. I know it sounds really silly, but I'm turning to horror because I go, well, I'm not as anxious as they are.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's partly tied to it, really.
But so without ruining,
of course,
that sort of horror, that surprise of it. How does the horror sort of manifest itself?
I'm going to tell you, listener, if you're interested in this game, don't watch any trailers.
Okay.
Because the horror in this, which I find works really, really well, is it doesn't resort to lots of jump scares or anything like that. It isn't the kind of visceral horror that you would expect in that regard. I would argue that it's much more Flanagan-esque in some regards.
Oh, my word. Okay.
In terms of the way it's structured and the pacing of it, really. And I, more often than not, I was scared by my own shadow, literally, because obviously you're in a crumbling oil rig, and the way the light plays, I generally be scared of my own shadow. And the sound design in this game is extraordinary. You hear sounds where you're not sure if it's just the natural kind of, well, I say natural, the creaking metallic sounds of an oil rig.
Yeah.
Or the screams of something.
Wow. That's ace.
You can't tell. It's imperceptible. But the company, when they went into the design of this game, they said, look, we've got, there are 3 tent poles that we have. There are 3 kind of missions we have with the design of this game. First things first, it's got to be personal. So they soak themselves up in that kind of era, the 1970s, particularly in the UK, of that form of realism. So they looked at directors such as Mike Leigh and Ken Loach, where there's that kind of social realism, but also that sense of dialogue feeling really natural. So Mike Leigh, obviously, when directing, would use a lot of improvisation to get that kind of sense of something natural there. And that's reflected in the voice acting cast, which are phenomenal. So particularly Alec Newman, who plays Kaz, and Nev McIntosh, who plays his wife Suze. And we encounter her in flashbacks. And it feels so grounded in Scotland. It doesn't feel stereotyped, and I'm not from Scotland. That's why I'm really interested to know in terms of it felt like when you were living in Orkney. There are so many turns of phrase, and the flow of it just feels natural and lived in. And it doesn't do that thing that a lot of games of this sort of thing do, where it hits you over the head with lots of diary entries that you just happen to find and stumble on, which tell you all the exposition you need. Not at all. There's very little of that.
There's not a big blood splatter and it says cut off the limbs.
No. It's those kinds of ellipses, those gaps that you fill in yourself, which works just as well for the horror as it does for these characters, because unlike Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, there are people on this oil rig that you see and you encounter and you talk to.
Oh, really?
And there's this,
okay, all
and
right.
the first 5 minutes, you go down to the canteen and they're there, and you can have a chat with them. And you know all you need to know about them, the way they behave, who sat next to who, and what your relationship is with them based on this interaction. And it feels really, really lovely. So when you encounter them later on, you've kind of got this little bit of a backstory you've already started developing that you can kind of put your hat on, really. So that sense of the personal is really key, and they really wanted that to kind of be what drives the game's experience. And second, tied to that, is authenticity. So they did extensive research. I didn't know this, that BP has an online database full of documentaries from their oil rigs. So the company just went and hoovered that all up and did all their research. They said that the 1970s was just very brown. And you get this wonderful kind of brown veneer on the screen. This is Unreal Engine 5, so it is photorealistic, which adds obviously to the horror, but also this sense you feel like you're in the 70s. But little things they were saying, they're like, well, yeah, just because you live in the 70s doesn't mean that everything you own is from the 70s, because it's 2024 now of time recording, but I own stuff that's from the 90s still. So understanding what people were owning at that time, what were in their rooms, that sort of thing, it's all there. And the fact this oil rig is kind of coming apart at the seams. There's a boss there who's cutting corners. There are several people talking about unionizing and...
Oh, the real horror.
Yeah, well, exactly. There's these kind of layers there really as well. And that's created some division amongst the workers there, as it were. So that you feel before any horror is kind of kicked in, there's already a kind of another horror here. And you feel that you are in conflict of some sort. that it needs resolving, aside from Kaz's own backstory and why he's on this oil rig. The third mission the company had was terrible beauty, this kind of horror. And with all of Chinese Rooms games, you get this sense of the uncanny, which, you know, his views are very controversial, understandably so, but this notion of the uncanny that Freud talks about in his essay, which I think was 1919, I think it's written, where I think the Unheimlich, which basically it translates as the unhomely, the uncanny. It's something that's shouldn't be here. And obviously Kaz feels a bit like that. He's just arrived in this job. And obviously this horror that appears in this oil rig shouldn't be here. But there's something about it that is both unbelievably grotesque, with lots of kind of body horror, but has these moments of exquisite beauty. And one of the key influences for them was the film Annihilation, which both you and I have seen.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And you know what I mean in that regard? That sense of there is something mesmerizing about that thing that is just so grotesque at the same time. You're both repulsed and drawn to this thing in equal measure. And that's what this horror does within the environment. And as a consequence, all those three things rolled in together meant that even though I was quite tense at times, I left this game just wanting to go back to it. I've become obsessed with this game, looking it up, seeing how other people play through it. I just want to go back to it. And I didn't at the time.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, because, yeah, when you started playing this, you did say, oh, it's kind of like, I think that obviously you've been waiting how many years since everyone's gone to the Raptures for another Chinese Room game to come out?
9 years.
So 9 years. And how many times have you replayed Everyone's Gone to the Rapture within that 9 years?
I say I've played Rapture about 25 times.
Okay, cool. So skirting over how horribly like inflated that number is.
Yes.
I thought you were going to say like 3 or 4. Just skipping over that, I think that when you started playing it, obviously it was never going to initially meet up to your expectations. But then having now finished it, you know, it's interesting to see how it's kind of just got underneath your skin. I mean, and I think that actually, upon reflection, thinking about how you first felt about Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, I'd probably say that that was a similar thought sort of thing for you. Like the more you played it and the more you thought about it, the more it eventually got underneath your skin. And that's the wonderful thing about the Chinese Room, right? It's like somehow, whether it's through environmental design or the voice acting or the worlds themselves, they just feel like infinite universes to explore over and over again.
No, definitely. I think one of the differences is that unlike Rapture is open world, you can pretty much walk wherever you want in Rapture. And there's only a few areas which are kind of triggered by certain things you have to do first.
And nothing's chasing after you.
No, exactly. Apart from that kind of glowing orb. But in this game, you are very much on a rail, a little bit like Dear Esther to some degree. It is very much a directed experience. Like, I never had to look up any guidance on walkthroughs online.
Bro.
It is very clear where you need to go. Gameplay-wise, you're essentially sprinting, running, jumping, flicking switches, turning valves, carefully balancing on pipes, that sort of thing, really. But the game directs you where you need to go. And some people, I think, have been a little bit turned off by that fact because it feels like you're just on a roller coaster. But it isn't like a series of QuickTime events. What it does, though, is it feels even more immersive because the oil rig itself feels like it's a living, breathing organism. It sees you as some kind of threat, really. And you'll return back to the same spaces numerous times, and they will have changed because whatever this horror is, it is changing this space.
Yeah.
And that is kind of unnerving. And I think if I could go where I wanted, I think you would lose some of that sense of intensity because you are racing against the clock here.
Okay.
Because the structural integrity of this oil rig is massively being affected. Areas of it are starting to flood. Now, if I could just walk wherever I wanted, that would kind of lose that sense of urgency, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But as a consequence, it just means I want to go back more because there'll be these moments of exquisite beauty that I didn't linger on because I got into that mindset. Look, I can't dawdle. I've got to go, as it were, really. And also because I kind of know what the horror is or where the horror is. Like, and this isn't a spoiler to a degree, a little bit like Alien Isolation. You get a little bit unnerved where, like, I'm just walking around the space. There's no threat there. And I see a locker and I interact with the locker and it just gives me the option, hide. I was like, okay, it's going to be one of those games, right? Okay. And I see vents, and there are moments in the game where you have to use these vents to kind of avoid a horror. But I would say 50% of those vents and lockers you will never use, but you don't know that when you're playing it the first time. So,
okay, yeah.
As I was saying before, I was scared of my own shadow. I became my own worst enemy. I was crawling through vents I didn't need to crawl through. I was going through levels because I was expecting something to jump out at any point, and I got myself so worked up that it did a better job than anything that could have jumped out at me.
But that's a sign of a good horror game, though.
It is an amazing good horror game in that regard. But because they've done their research, like all the puzzles you do, it seems logical. And like I was watching interviews with members of the team, and one of them now has just become an expert on how an oil rig works in the 70s, like how it all works. And like, it's been brilliant because they've literally gone, okay, if this were to happen on an oil rig, what would you need to do? Well, you need to do this, then this, then this. And that is literally what you do. And you genuinely feel like you are working this oil rig.
We've still not talked about what we actually played on your mini Stag's Day.
No.
I think we did play Spiel des Jahres nominated In the Footsteps of Darwin, which I think we might come back to. I think we might come back to that next week because I want to play that with more people, with more than two people. But I think that we were both agreed that it is very deserving of its nomination as one of the best board games that have been released this year. Or at least, what they managed to do is be games that appeal to a broad amount of people in very, very clever and smart ways. And I think In the Footsteps of Darwin absolutely, nails that. And it'll be interesting to talk about it, but I want to play that with some more people because I'll just be interested to see how it kind of stretches or contracts as a game when it's just more than two people. So instead, let's talk about Courtisans.
Yes.
Which it's released in this country under Catch-Up Games. I think it is published elsewhere in the world from Pandasaurus. So Courtisans is... The game is described on BGG as when the Queen holds her banquet, skullduggery is on the menu. And so how Courtisans works, essentially, it's a game of cards, and what you're trying to do as players is basically manipulate this event. The Queen's having this big, long banquet, and what you're doing is you're playing cards in certain ways in order to manipulate the outcome to your benefit. And I know even describing it now, it's kind of like, well, isn't that every single card game on Earth? Well, yeah, it is, but Courtisans does it in a much more sort of overt way. And for that, I think it's very, very interesting because the headline for it for me is Courtisans is one of a very rare breed of take that games that manages to get away without it feeling unfair.
Yeah, I hadn't actually... Do you know what? It's really interesting. It is a take that game. I hadn't actually characterised it as that, but you're right, it is.
No, but it manages to get away with it. So, how the game works, and it comes in this really nice little box. You've got this massive deck of cards. The cards and the art are absolutely stunning. They're beautiful. There's lots of little like gold embellishes. So the cards, some of the special cards sort of flicker and sort of shine in the light. It's got this wonderful cartoony artwork, but yet there's some grotesquerie in it as well, which I really liked. Also comes with a fabric board, which needs a bit of an iron straight out of the box, just letting you know. But it comes with this nice little fabric board that you kind of just roll out. And that's the banquet, which is quite nice and thematic, 'cause it's almost like you're laying the table. And on this fabric board shows the picture of the banquet. So you've got the queen in the middle, then either side of the queen are the 6 houses, the 6 factions of the game. And on your turn, all you do is you have 3 cards in your hand, and you have to play 1 card to the banquet, 1 card into your area, and then 1 card into someone else's area around the table. So when me and Kris are playing it, always had to go to Kris. Kris always had to play 1 card for me. But when you're playing it with more players, you decide where those cards are going to go. Now, it's important, and the important sort of crucial element of the game is the positioning of the cards when you play them to the banquet in the centre of the table. If you play them below the sort of central runner, those counts as positive points in terms of how favourable the queen sees that particular house or faction. If you play them above the runner, above the seats and the chairs, that will count as negative points to how the queen sees that faction. And once you've finished the games, once all the cards have been spent, everyone's taken all their turns. If the positive outweighs the negative, then the queen will look favourably on that faction. If there's more negative cards, more cards above the table than there is below, that faction or that house will have fallen from grace. And the impact that has on you as a player is any cards that are in front of you from a house that have fallen from grace is minus points. Any cards that you've got in front of you from a house that has got favour are positive points. There are some special cards that do things, like there is assassin cards that allow you to remove different cards from different locations. There are cards that double up their presence, so they're worth 2 cards instead of 1 card. There's cards that are particularly defensive, so they can't be removed. They're basically, once they're placed, they're placed. I think the most interesting card that we encountered were the spy cards.
Oh, yes.
And spy cards are played face down into either a central portion of the board, or they're placed face down on the player's side of things. So you don't know how they're going to interact with the balance of the game until the game is complete. So there are several things I think that the game does which makes it a really, really compelling game. And to take that game where you're always jostling for position, there's a constant tug of war going on between loads of people around the table, but it manages to get away with it. And the main reason that it does that is by the fact that it's a completely random pick as to what cards you draw on your turn. Everyone just always draws 3 cards off the top of the deck, and it's a completely random pick. And then you've got to decide how you're going to best distribute that. And then the second thing is the fact that you always have to play your 3 cards into the same 3 locations every single time. You have to give 1 to yourself, you have to give 1 to the middle of the table, and you have to give 1 to another player. And often there were times when I just had to benefit you, or there were times that I had to take the hit on myself, or there was times that I had to really think about some sort of strategic promise that may or may not pay off in the future, depending on what kind of cards I was just going to draw from the deck. So there is this brilliant balance between the deliciousness of seeing you squirm as a big load of positive points that you think you're collecting suddenly turns to negative, and also that feeling of gambling and just hoping that you will get the that you will get the cards that you need to turn the tide in the table from the from drawing from the deck. And we play this as a 2, and I was just absolutely dumbfounded by how good this worked as a 2-player game. We've played some remarkable 2-player games, most recently District Noir,
brilliant game,
and Compromat, as well as such esteemed classics such as like Targi and Patchwork and Watergate, etc., etc. This is vying for
oh yes,
for the throne in my opinion.
No, definitely.
It made even more appealing by the fact it can go up to 5 players.
I know, and
I'm itching to play it at 5 because I think it'll just be absolute chaos. And I'll be really interested to see if it actually manages to hold together, or it becomes a completely different game at that point.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting you talk about the spy cards. The spy cards are crucial for a number of reasons. One, because it creates that sense of the unknown, which is always fun. But 2, it actually stops you from kind of just making it all about you and I just fighting against each other just for one particular suit, because we don't know what's been put there at all.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I really like about this game is that you can give me a card, and it's not like in some games where, you've given me a -10. Oh, great. And it's on my card in front of me.
Yeah.
I still have the power to change that number into a positive based on what's in that central board. Yes, it's fluctuating, but I still have the power to change that. And equally also, I may not want to, because you don't know what my secret objective cards are, the 2 of them. And it might be that actually I want that particular house to fall out of favour with the Queen, and you inadvertently have played into my hands. And that itself means I don't get too precious. And with the kind of quite cheeky art style by Noemi Chevalier, you've got that sense of like not taking things too personal here. But 20 to 30 minute playtime. I mean, this is just, I don't even want to call it a filler because that renders it a disservice, but I think it is just like Compromat, those games where suddenly you're in and you get it straight away, you get it, and you can strategize to some degree, but ultimately you don't know what those spy cards contain, and you might just get unlucky.
Did you feel like I did? And I think this was where it really struck me. And really, I felt like even if I can't find a way of articulating it, or I can't find a real way of being able to communicate like how the game does this. But did you feel like every time it was your turn, it really felt like it mattered? It really felt like how you were going to distribute those cards would have a big effect, like going on to the game.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how it does that, whether that's just a feeling that you get at 2 players and that becomes slightly diluted with more. I don't know. I am getting this in front of more people as soon as possible. But it felt like one wrong step, giving one person the wrong card, or putting the wrong card in the wrong place at the banquet, or even giving yourself the wrong card, really always felt like it mattered.
Yeah.
And that is exceedingly rare for these kind of games, whereas often there's like a throwaway turns, or by the time it gets round to you, you've already considered what you're going to do in your turn, so it feels like a bit inconsequential, and you're kind of waiting for the room to hurry up. But I was always interested in what you were doing, and I was always interested by what I was doing, because the push and pull around the table was ever changing, and you got to stay on top of that. It was essential.
Yeah, and I think that 2-player dynamic, it made me think of one of my favorite 2-player games, which tends to get a lot of love, which is Hanami Koji.
Yeah.
Where but that has the kind of mechanic of I cut, you choose, where it's like, okay, I'm giving you choices and here now, you've got to work with this. What I found was, because you were picking up free cards every time, I always found that 2 of those cards would be useful if I kept them. 2 of those cards would be useful if I kept them in, put them in the central kind of tableau, and 2 of those cards would be useful if I gave them to you. So it was never the case if I had nothing to do. It was like, oh my word, I've got 2 really good options here, and I've got to try and look for the short-term gain now, or maybe put this card here to put you off the scent, or I just play it safe, hedge my bets, and go here. And that was brilliant. And obviously I'm switched on because, I'm going to get a card when it's your go, which is going to kind of affect how I'm going to perhaps go in the next round. Add on top of that is the fact that I'm playing all my cards every go.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. I only live one go at a time. I'm only focused one go at a time, which means that I can always, my entire attention is entirely on what you're doing, not what's really in my hand, as it were. Mm-hmm. So I think we're getting a lot of these games which are taking a mechanic and distilling it and just saying, yep, it's this. Nothing else, just this. And we're fine with that, really. Because sometimes, because board games, the board game genre, the board game movement has created so many different genres. And you've got lots of big, bulky Euro games and Kickstarter games which are looking for different combinations of genres. We've got this interesting kind of pushback where lots of companies are saying, well, actually, we just want to make something that isn't a big, bloated Kickstarter game, that isn't a campaign. It's 20 to 30 minutes, and it's just one mechanic. And we're going to put everything into that one mechanic so it really sings. And the theme might be a kind of an aesthetic, but it doesn't outstay its welcome. And it scratches that itch about all the things you love about that genre, where I don't have to play a game like Masquerade, for example, or Werewolf to kind of get those feelings of cards face down, moving around, changes in roles, changes in value of certain cards, and it all gets a bit messy and you have to play it for lots of people for it to work. I can get that feeling with just me and you.
Who do you think the top 10 doctors in the top 10 greatest fictional doctors are?
Okay, so I would go with Watson.
He's not made the list.
What, Doctor Who?
Not made the list.
Dr. Strangelove?
Not made the list.
Dr. Zhivago?
No.
Dr. Horrible Singalong?
This is according to howstuffworks.com.
Fictional doctors. Are you talking about like doctors in like hospital shows? Like Dr. Cox, Dr. Perry Cox, Dr. House?
House is number 1. Yeah. House MD, Dr. Gregory House. Yeah, so these are top 10 sort of fictional doctors. All of them, well, one of them works on a spaceship. All of them work in a sort of hospital setting. So
there's none of the... is it the Big Bang Theory? I think they've all got PhDs, haven't they, apart from one of them?
They've all got... Yeah. It's not... that was a very interesting angle at it. But House is 1. Dougie Hauser, number 2, which I don't think was...
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris. Wasn't he like a child?
Yes, he was. He was very young, yeah.
Then there's Hawkeye from MASH. You were slightly on it with JD from Scrubs. John Carter from ER. Is that
Is that Anthony? Oh my gosh, I've forgotten his last name. Is it John Carter? I don't know. Or it might be. Is that George Clooney's character's name? I don't know. I never really watched ER.
Mark Green was probably the one that you're thinking of. John Carter was Noah Weil.
Oh yes, of course. Would there be one from Grey's Anatomy on here, I imagine, on this list?
Oh, there is one from Grey's Anatomy. Do you know the Miranda Bailey?
Right.
No, there's obviously Dr. McCoy.
God damn it, Jim.
Dr. Quinn.
Medicine Woman.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Fraser Crane.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah. I was also thinking of... they've got to have Dick Van Dyke's character from Diagnosis Murder.
Oh, they do not. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Throw this list out then. I'm sorry.
You'll either be surprised or delighted by the last person on the list. He is fiction. He is the most fictional in terms that he is animated, and he appears in the longest running animated show on.
Oh, Dr. Hibbert.
TV. No.
Oh, Dr. Nick.
Dr. Nick.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Number 10 of the greatest.
Greatest. I mean, that's a question I want to put to the How Stuff Works website. How the hell does this list work?
Right. So now the wedding's over. What next, Kris?
What next? So we will be going on a little mini moon.
Awesome.
To Poland, Krakow, for about 5 days, which we're looking forward to. Then I've got some bits of leave to take where you and I will probably hang out. I'm really keen to play, because I know you've been reading Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really keen to play Fury of Dracula with you.
Yeah, me too. 100%. Yeah, down with that. So, have you got any sort of video games or other things or board games that you're going to take away with you on your mini moon? Because if you want some recommendations, then of course you can always recall what we've talked about.
Oh my word, yes.
The podcast. So you can go to BGG to find some board game recommendations while you're traveling over to Poland, because we've got a curated page there which features everything that we've talked about, which will definitely include Courtisans from this week. And if you're looking for maybe a video game which you can stick on your Switch for the plane ride over, then head on to Steam, where you can also find our curated page where every video game that we've ever spoken about, which will now include Jusant and Still Wakes the Deep, appears, as long as it's on sale on Steam, appears on that list. So if, like Kris, you are jetting off somewhere and looking for something to while away the hours in an airport or by the beach or by the pool or whatever, then do head on over to there, where you can see sort of a collated list of stuff that we talked about. And if you want even more than that, then Kris has diligently compiled different music and soundtracks and excerpts from anything that we've talked about that has an accompanying piece of music or soundtrack or excerpt onto Spotify. So we'll definitely get some music from Still Wakes the Deep and Jusant onto those Spotify lists. They're a bit of a bugger to find, but if you go to the show notes in the podcast, then you'll be able to find them there. And I guess the last thing to say is, if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to say hello, if you want to say, here is something that we should be checking out, if you want to say thanks for introducing you to something lovely, then please do get in touch with us. stayinginpod@gmail.com, or just head on over to Instagram @stayinginpod.
Have you come across a person called Stephen Leatherman, Sam?
Stephen Leatherman?
Stephen Leatherman. So he's like very famous, I believe, in America, because he reviews beaches, essentially. He's the kind of go-to person. His nickname is Dr. Beach.
All right. Well, shall we see him on it?
I think we should.